I was completely caught off guard when I heard my wife talk about me that way. We were out with her friends for a casual dinner, something she had planned weeks in advance. Honestly, I didn't even want to go. These nights always felt the same. Her chatting away with her friends while I just sat there, half listening and barely part of the conversation. But this time, I wasn't sitting right beside her. The place was crowded, and we ended up at a long table with me a few seats down, just far enough that she probably didn't think I could hear her. At first, I wasn't really paying attention. My mind was wandering, maybe thinking about work or weekend plans. But then, through all the noise, I heard one of her friends ask, "So, how's married life treating you?" Her response? She laughed, a loud, almost dismissive laugh, and then said something I'll never forget. "Oh, please. He's just my roommate at this point, just my roommate." I don't even remember what was said after that because my mind just went blank. It wasn't just the words, it was the way she said them. She wasn't joking around or being playful. She wasn't being sarcastic or affectionate. She sounded completely serious, like she'd already accepted this as the reality of our relationship. And the worst part? The way her friends reacted, laughing and nodding, made it obvious this wasn't the first time she'd said something like that. It hit me hard. I sat there, her words sinking into me like a heavy weight in my stomach. I wasn't angry, not right then. I wasn't even sad. I was just shocked. Was that really how she saw me? Just a roommate? I started going over the last few months, even the last year, trying to figure out when things had shifted. When had I stopped being her husband and turned into someone who just shared her space? Had I been completely oblivious this whole time? I know I'm not perfect, nobody is, but I never once thought of her as anything less than my wife. I worked hard. I supported her. I tried to make an effort. And yet, there she was, talking about me like I was just some guy who happened to live with her. The rest of the dinner was a blur. I didn't say much, didn't react, didn't confront her right there. What was I supposed to do? Make a scene in the middle of the restaurant? Ask her to explain herself while her friends watched? No, I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of knowing she'd hit a nerve. But inside, something changed. For the rest of the night, I watched her differently. The way she barely looked at me. The way she was so into conversations with everyone else but me. The way she laughed and joked with her friends while I sat there like I didn't exist. And then it hit me. I was already living as her roommate. I just hadn't seen it until now. When we got home, I didn't say a word. I didn't ask her about it. I didn't demand an explanation. I was still trying to figure out how I felt. But one thing was clear. Something had shifted. I wasn't sure what I was going to do about it yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to settle for being just a roommate anymore. The silence between us that night felt heavier than usual. When we got home from dinner, she went through her normal routine, kicking off her shoes, grabbing a glass of water, scrolling through her phone, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just humiliated me in front of her friends. I watched her for a moment, waiting to see if she'd bring it up, if she'd realize what she'd said and how it had come across. But nothing. Not a single look my way. Not even a hint that she thought anything was wrong. That's when I knew I had to say something. "Why did you say that?" I asked. She barely glanced up. "Say what?" she replied, distracted. "At dinner, when they asked about married life." She frowned a little, still focused on her phone. "What are you talking about?" "You called me your roommate." That got her attention. She looked up, rolling her eyes like I was blowing things out of proportion. "Oh, that? Come on, it was just a joke." "A joke?" I let out a dry laugh. "You didn't sound like you were joking." She sighed and put her phone down, finally looking at me. "You're being too sensitive. It was just something to say. I didn't mean anything by it." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to convince myself that I was overreacting, that it was just a careless comment and not a reflection of how she really saw me. But I couldn't. Deep down, I knew better. "You didn't mean anything by it," I repeated, shaking my head. "So if I said the same thing about you, if I told my friends you were just my roommate, you wouldn't care?" She scoffed. "I wouldn't because I wouldn't take it so seriously." I looked at her. trying to find some hint of regret, some sign that she understood why this hurt so much. But there was nothing, just annoyance, like I was the one causing trouble. "You've said that before, haven't you?" I asked. She didn't answer right away, and that pause told me everything I needed to know. My chest felt heavy as it sank in. This wasn't just some offhand comment. She'd said it before. She actually believed it. It wasn't just about the words. It was what they meant. She had already checked out of our marriage. Maybe she had been gone for a while. Maybe I'd been holding on to something that wasn't even there anymore. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was just drained. "I don't think you see me as your husband anymore," I said, more to myself than to her. She sighed again, rubbing her temples like I was wearing her out. "Can we not do this right now?" That was it. That was all she had to say. No apology, no explanation, just a request to stop talking about it. I nodded slowly. "Fine," I said quietly. I turned and walked away, heading to the bedroom. But deep down I knew this wasn't over, not even close. She didn't see me as her husband. The woman lying next to me, if you could even call it that, since she'd spent the whole night turned away from me, her back like a wall between us, didn't respect me. Maybe she hadn't for a long time. And if that was true, then what was I still doing here? The next morning, I got up earlier than usual. I showered, got dressed, and walked into the kitchen like I always did. She was already there, making coffee and scrolling through her phone. She glanced at me briefly before turning back to the screen. For her, it was just another day. Last night's conversation was already forgotten, buried under 100 other thoughts. She didn't see how much it had affected me. She didn't care that I'd spent the whole night lying awake, realizing I was wasting my time. And that's when I knew I was done. I didn't make a big announcement. I didn't sit her down for some dramatic talk about how I deserved better or needed someone who actually valued me. What would be the point? She'd already shown me exactly what I meant to her. No speech was going to change that. So I started making a plan. I checked our lease. Her name was the only one on it. The bills? All under her name too. Everything about this place, the life we'd built together, was technically hers. That actually made things easier. I didn't have to fight for anything. I had some savings, enough to get my own place. I could move out without any hassle. The only thing left was to decide when. For the next few days, I played along. I went to work, came home, acted like everything was fine, but I was already pulling away. I started packing little by little, taking only what was mine: clothes, electronics, important documents. Everything else? She could keep it. She didn't notice. She didn't ask why I was suddenly cleaning out my side of the closet or why some of my things were disappearing. She didn't pay enough attention to me for that. And honestly, that just confirmed I was making the right choice. The night before I left, I sat in the living room, taking one last look around. This place had been ours once, a home we'd built together. But now, it was just a space where two people happened to live under the same roof. I wasn't going to be a part of it anymore. By the next evening, I was gone. I didn't leave a note. I didn't send a message. I just left. Walking away was easier than I thought it would be. I took nothing but a couple of suitcases, my laptop, and the essentials. There was no big goodbye, no final argument. I just walked out the door, closed it behind me, and left her to deal with the mess she'd made. The first night on my own felt strange, but not in the way I expected. There was no sadness, no regret, just a quiet kind of relief. I'd booked a short-term rental while I figured out my next steps, and as I sat in that unfamiliar space, it hit me. This was the first time in years I'd truly felt at peace, but while I was settling into my new freedom, she was still clueless. I thought she'd notice my absence right away, that I'd get a flood of texts or a barrage of missed calls. But the first night? Nothing. The next morning? Still nothing. I checked my phone a few times out of curiosity, but there were no messages, no calls. At first I wondered if maybe she hadn't come home yet. Maybe she'd stayed out late or crashed at a friend's place. But as the hours passed, I started to ask myself, had she even realized I was gone? That question answered itself when, late that evening, I finally saw her name pop up on my phone. Where are you? Not, are you okay? Not, what happened? Not even, Why did you leave? Just 3 words. No emotion, no urgency. I didn't respond. I wanted to see what she'd do next, whether she'd actually try to talk or just let it go. She didn't call, didn't follow up, and that told me everything I needed to know. But while she could pretend nothing had changed, reality was about to hit her hard. Rent was due soon, utilities too, and this time she wouldn't have my paycheck helping to cover them. I checked the numbers before I left. I knew what she made and what our expenses were. She could afford the place if she cut back a lot, but it wouldn't be easy, and it didn't take long for the cracks to show. A week after I left, I got another message. This time the tone was different. Did you cancel the autopay for the bills? I didn't answer. 2 days later, another one. I need to talk to you. Call me. She wasn't asking where I was anymore. She wasn't pretending it didn't matter. Reality was sinking in. She was alone now. She'd laughed with her friends about me being just a roommate, but now she was seeing what that actually meant. No one to split the costs, no one to help keep things running, no one there at all. And I had no intention of coming back. The messages kept coming. At first they were spaced out, cautious, like she was testing the waters to see if I'd respond. But when she realized I wasn't playing along, the tone shifted. She started calling. I let every call go to voicemail. I wasn't interested in whatever excuse she had ready, and I definitely wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of hearing my voice. One night, she sent me a longer message than usual. Look, I know things got weird between us, but we need to talk. This feels like it's gone too far, and I don't get why you're acting this way. Can we meet up? The part about why I was doing this stuck with me. She really didn't understand. She had embarrassed me in front of her friends, brushed off my feelings when I tried to talk to her, and made me feel like I didn't matter in our own home. But now, because things were getting uncomfortable for her, she suddenly wanted to talk. I didn't respond. The next day, she sent another message. I don't want things to end like this. Can we at least talk? Now it was about us. Now, all of a sudden, she didn't want things to end. I wasn't dumb. I knew what was going on. She wasn't reaching out because she missed me or realized she'd messed up. She was reaching out because she didn't like facing the fallout. Still, part of me was curious. I wanted to see how far she'd take this, so I agreed to meet. Not at our place, though, and not anywhere private. I chose a coffee shop, neutral territory, somewhere public where she couldn't turn it into some big emotional scene. When I walked in, she was already there, sitting by the window. She looked different, not sad or sorry, just uncomfortable. As soon as she saw me, she gave me a forced smile. Hey. I nodded and sat down across from her, waiting. She hesitated before saying anything, her hands gripping her coffee cup like she needed something to hold on to. I don't even know how to start this, she said. I stayed quiet. She let out a sigh. I think you overreacted. I didn't mean what I said the way you took it. If we just talk it out, I think we can fix this. I let her words sit there for a moment before finally saying, You think I left because of one thing you said? She looked surprised, like that idea had never even occurred to her. I leaned in a little. That wasn't just a joke. That's how you really saw me. And that night, I realized I was done being in a marriage where I was just a roommate to my own wife. Her mouth opened like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. She knew I was right. Still, she tried again. I didn't mean it like that, she said. I was just venting. My friends and I joke like that all the time. I shook my head. Jokes always have some truth in them. She didn't have anything to say to that. For a while, neither of us spoke. Finally, she sighed and leaned back in her chair. So, that's it? I nodded. That's it. She looked down at her coffee, her face hard to read. And for the first time, I saw it. The moment it hit her that she'd pushed me too far, that there was no fixing this. I stood up. Take care of yourself. And with that, I walked out. For the first time in years, I didn't have to wonder where I stood in my own relationship. I didn't have to ask myself if I was being taken for granted or wasting my time trying to be someone who mattered to her. I had my answer, And now I had my freedom. Over the next few weeks, she tried reaching out a few more times. Nothing big, just small, half-hearted attempts to start talking again. "Hey, just checking in. Hope you're doing okay. Let me know if you want to talk." I didn't respond. She wasn't reaching out because she missed me. She missed what I provided, the convenience, the financial support, the comfort of having someone around. But love? Respect? Those were never really part of the deal for her. I heard from a mutual friend that a couple of months after I left, she had to downsize. She couldn't afford the rent on her own and had to give up the apartment, the place that was supposed to be ours, but had always felt like hers. I won't lie. Part of me felt a little satisfaction hearing that. Not because I wanted her to struggle, but because she finally had to face the reality of what it meant to treat someone like they were disposable. She had to live with the consequences of being alone. As for me, I moved on. I found a new place, a smaller apartment that was completely mine. No shared space, no one treating me like I was just part of the furniture. It was quiet, peaceful. And every morning when I woke up, I didn't feel that resentment or frustration or the heavy sinking feeling that had become so normal in my marriage. I felt good. People talk about closure like it's some big dramatic moment, like there's supposed to be an apology or a final conversation that ties everything up perfectly. But sometimes closure isn't about them. It's about you realizing you don't need their apology or their approval. You just need to walk away. And that's exactly what I did.